Welcome, and thank you for sticking through lunch and coming to hear about public service and professional development. I'm Sandra Bass. I am the Associate Dean of Students and Director of the Public Service Center here at Cal. Two of my staff are here. I'm hoping some more might show up, so if you guys have questions, you can ask them. So you're going to learn a few things about me, and the first thing you're going to learn about me is that I don't do talks 6 weeks in advance. So whatever's on the app is completely different from what I'm going to show you today, which I finalized like this morning. But if you want to have a copy, I think I'm going to send a copy of the PowerPoint to Annette, and she'll upload it. And so you'll have that available for you. Just to start off, has anybody involved in volunteering now? Great. Yep, all of that counts. Great. So what I'm hoping today is I really want to have a conversation about what are the things that you can experience as you get engaged with public service and how that can be helpful to your professional development and your career. I want to talk about how we engage with communities and how important it is that when we think about engaging with communities that we're mindful and thoughtful about that. And some things to think about when you're considering a volunteer opportunity. The other thing I'd say is there's a lot of experience in the room. And so at various points, I'm going to stop and ask people to share their thinking. And so these are just sort of my top line thoughts on some of these questions, but I certainly hope all of you will be engaged. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a native Californian. I ended up doing my Ph.D. in political science at UC Berkeley. And went on to be a professor for a while, and then I went on to work in philanthropy, and in the course of that career I spent a few years working in sub-Saharan Africa on girls' education and women's leadership. And that experience was transformative for me, ended up coming back to Berkeley in the role that I'm in now. And intertwined throughout that have been really critical volunteering opportunities for me that have really changed how I thought about myself and how I thought about the world, in all honesty. One of them is was most excited about. I was the board chair for the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights here in Oakland for a number of years. And if you guys know them, it's such a great organization. But the other thing is I did a lot of volunteering for the Obama campaign in 2008 and 2012 and ended up doing some canvassing for his campaign in Colorado for a few weeks in the mountains of Colorado by myself. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But it was just one of those things where, for me, the more that I got engaged in different kinds of service opportunities, I felt like, first of all, that I was contributing and that I was having an impact. But also, it literally does change how you think about yourself and what you want to do with your life. And so I'm hoping today that we can get you excited about thinking about that for yourself if you're not already doing it. So before I get started, you guys can go ahead and by the way, can you hear me back there? Yes. Okay, great. I want to just take a couple of seconds for you guys, I forgot to do this, that's me, to do a couple of introductions yourselves. So just turn to someone next to you. Ideally, you don't know that person. Tell them your name, where you work and what you do in your work, and then a book or a movie that changed your life and why, and just 1 or 2 sentences. Okay, so let's just take a couple minutes, and I'll tell you, the first person can start, and then I'll tell you when you can switch. I love it when you guys, I always feel bad when I have to interrupt people talking, because I'm like, it starts right at the best part, but we need to get moving on. And I forgot one other thing. On that very back row, there are a couple of boxes of books. This is written by a professor emeritus at Berkeley, Arthur Blaustein. He was very instrumental in the Johnson administration in the 60s and all of that work that came out of that administration. And every year he donates these books for us to give away to people who are interested in getting engaged in public service and volunteering. So there are 2 boxes back there. I may not have brought enough for everybody, but we have a lot of books. So if there's not enough, do not fret. You can just come by the Public Service Center at 218 Eshelman Hall. We'll have them up at the front desk, behind the front desk, and just come and pick up a book. So I wanted to go back to this quote that I had up when you guys came in. And I did this very intentionally of starting here. Because one of the things at the Public Service Center that we think is so critical is that we're engaging with communities, that we put the communities first. And so this quote, which I'll just read out, if you have come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. And it's just a reminder that when we engage with communities, it is so critical that we approach them with respect and with dignity, that we honor community wisdom, and that we realize that we're not there to save them. We are not saviors. We are there to work with them in partnership and solidarity because we are human beings with a shared destiny and a linked fate. And I think when you come with that perspective, then community organizations and communities can accept what you have to offer. And so I wanted to just give a couple of thoughts about how to think about entering community, particularly as Cal employees, because we often don't think of ourselves as having quote unquote privilege, but in the context of a community and some of these small community organizations, we have a lot of resources and we have a lot of stability, having worked for nonprofits, a lot more stability than a lot of nonprofits. And so just being mindful that when you come to a community organization that you want to work with, that they may actually see a bit of a power differential, and to be mindful in that. And to approach with humility and curiosity. And I would also say grace. And then be clear with your community partner. And we're going to do an exercise a little bit later. Your partner and also yourself of what your capacity is and what it is that you would like to be engaged with them with, and to have that be a conversation. And again, sometimes there's really a range of how you can engage with organizations. Some people like more small, episodic, kind of project-based work. I mean, I have a very full life, so for me, what I like to do is I like to do phone banking and, one-time volunteering opportunities, or like going out and knocking on doors in other districts, because that's what I can do given my time. But it can go all the way up to a much more longer-term engagement. And when you get into the longer-term engagements is when you can really think about how this is very specifically developing certain professional development skills. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the other thing I want us to remind ourselves of is that service is also a source of joy. This is another quote I love. I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. I think certainly for myself and for many of us, we're engaged because we care about the world. But the reality is I feel great afterwards. I feel great about that. And I think that's okay. And that's why I think it's really important that we're mindful, again, that our first goal is how can I be helpful to this community or to this issue? But that sense of joy, that sense of purpose and meaning is also something that's valuable, and we can honor that as well. So before I move on to this next piece, does anybody else want to pop out some ideas about working with community? Anything you think that I missed that maybe we should talk about and be aware of? Great. So I'll go ahead and so you always come up with something later. So let's talk a little bit about the professional development piece of public service. And one of the things I want to note is that there's a couple of different ways to approach this. For some people, when they're approaching public services professional development, it's really about, I want to make a career switch in some way. And this is a way for me to develop the certain skills or networks or what have you. Another thing is how to deepen within your own work. And so just bear that in mind as I go through some of these of what might be most useful for you given what your particular goals are. So one, networking, meeting new people. This is actually probably one of the most impactful things you can get from a public service engagement. And particularly if you're a person who's comfortable with networking. So one of the things I would recommend if that's an important goal for you is to really think about what is your networking approach. I'll tell you, for me, honestly, like if people are like really instrumental, like I want to meet you because you do this, and they're hacking your hand, and what do you do, and how can you help me? That does not I'm immediately like, what's going on? But if you approach it from the standpoint of curiosity, and I'm actually interested in you as a person, and you might be interested in me as a person, it totally changes the dynamic, and it actually makes networking a lot easier. So that's my sort of tip on networking. Sharpening skills and developing new ones. You know, sometimes when you're in an institution or an organization for a long time, you get accustomed to doing how they do it. And so, you know, the world is changing, lots of different organizations, and so sometimes it's nice to go when you're working with an organization that's very different from your own, to learn about how they're sort of approaching that. And it helps you develop new skill sets, and sometimes, in all honesty, stay a little up to date, because I think sometimes it's, you know, big institutions change a little bit more slowly. And for survival purposes, oftentimes, you know, smaller institutions or organizations have to change more quickly. And so they may have some new ways of thinking about work. So that's one thing that's really helpful. And also, of course, developing new ones. If you want to stretch in certain ways, getting engaged in different community organizations is one way to do that. And I would just be honest with an organization about that's what you're really hoping to do, that you're taking something you have as a skill that you think is transferable and stretching into something different. Different organizational cultures and styles. This one I actually like a lot. When I worked here for a foundation, my job was to go out and meet with different kinds of community organizations and NGOs, all the way from little tiny 2 and 3 people shops to huge multinational organizations. And one of the things I loved about it is you learn about how different people think about work and how they want to work together. And what's helpful about that is sometimes you're like, oh, I don't ever want to work like a place like that. And it's really clear, like, this is not going to work for me. And that's actually really valuable knowledge. But other times you're like, wow, that's really cool. I had never thought about approaching it that way, or working that way, or organizing work in that way. So it's another thing you can kind of pick up from working with different organizations. Personal and professional renewal. You know, one of the things I found so interesting when I came to my position at the Public Service Center is that when I looked at the first set of surveys, and I was really curious, like, what are the community partners saying about working with our students? And one of the things that came up consistently was, we love having new people here. It helps us feel more engaged and excited about our work. And I would say it's the same for the people who are volunteering. That, you know, just being in a new space and being engaged in something that you care about, that, you know, it lifts you up. And even if you have no intention at all of changing what you do professionally, it can actually bring more to the work that you do now, because it's sort of lighting that fire inside. And I personally, that's one of the things I really love about doing a lot of work with community organizations. And also personal growth. And I'll just give you one example on that end. So when I was volunteering for the Obama campaign, and I don't know why they did this, but they sent me out to the farthest depths of the mountains of Colorado by myself. And, you know, they give you these little sheets of paper, and you're supposed to knock on the door and encourage them to vote and have a conversation. And I purposely chose Colorado because I wanted to work in a battleground state, and I wanted to learn about people that were not like me. It was very intentional. And so sure enough, I knock on a door, and this guy opens the door, and, you know, he's got the shaved head, he's got the tattoos, he's a white man. You know, he had something like F something on his shirt and some boots. And, you know, my first thought was like, and this is happening. And, you know, I can't tell you how I sort of why I sort of was calm in that moment. I really can't tell you why. But we started this conversation. He immediately started you-peopling me. You people knock on the door and do this. And you people are always complaining. And you people are always mad. And I can't really tell you the exact words of the conversation, but kind of went back and forth, and I was just pretty much listening, to be honest with you. And so the end of the conversation, I said, you know what? I'm just really glad that you're interested in what's happening in our country, and I just want to encourage you to vote however you choose to vote, and thank you for spending some time with me. And so walked around, I'm going down the driveway. He comes out of the door following behind me. And he literally almost had tears in his eyes. And he said, it's the first time someone like you actually listened to me. I get kind of teary about it. And the reason I do is that I don't know what he chose to do with his life or what he's doing now, but I think those are moments when, for me, I recognize that sometimes all of that is covering up someone's humanity. And how do we think about engaging someone on a human level? So whenever I think about personal and professional renewal, I always reflect back on that story. Leadership development. So this is one where I often think of as serving on boards is a great way to get leadership development skills. Has anybody ever served on a board? Great. Now, board service is interesting because oftentimes there is an expectation that you're giving more than your time. Like a lot of boards would like to know that you're also going to give something monetarily. Not all. But just know if that's something you're going to pursue, that most likely there's going to be some ask about you giving, and it's usually not a lot. I mean, that's all contextual, but there's sometimes an ask that you give to the organization. And of course, you're giving of your time, and it's a very sort of skilled giving of your time. Like they really want someone who has something they need for their organization. So it could be you have finance skills. That's one that a lot of organizations want and need. Fundraising skills, if you have that. You might have some kind of substantive expertise that organization works on. And it's a great way to learn about, first of all, great networking opportunity, right, for your other board members. But it's a great way to think about what exactly are the things that make an organization work and run and function from that standpoint of really high level. And so if that's something you're interested in, I would highly suggest pursuing it, because the times I've served on boards, it typically does take a lot more time than some other opportunities, but it's such a rich experience, and so much skills and wisdom, to be honest with you, that I've gotten from those experiences. And the last thing I wanted to point out is retirement planning. There's a lot of interest now from both ends, both in terms of organizations, but also for people who are nearing retirement, to think about giving back beyond that, as they plan their retirement. When I was working for the Packard Foundation, one of my grantees was Encore Careers. I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but their whole thing is we're going to help you transition into taking the skills you have now and applying that to some public service opportunity. And what's interesting about that approach is that some people do it purely for the experience and for volunteering, but Encore Careers is really about how do you also do that for some kind of income. It may not be the same level of income that you have now, but for some people, they want to have a little bit of extra money when they retire and still give back. So one of the great things about doing public service as you're planning for your retirement is it gives you an opportunity to kind of feel it out. Like, is this something I want to do? Do I want to work with this organization? You can sort of plot your path forward. So any other things that people want to raise? Like any other reasons that you might want to be, or you think might be good reasons to connect public service and your own professional development? Go ahead.
You could potentially learn about organizations that then, like for instance, I'm an advisor, I could then refer my students to that type of organization. Learn something about the labor that would be helpful in my work.
That's excellent. I will say, and you guys probably see this too, that senior year, come like middle of spring, students are so anxious, especially if they don't have an idea what they're going to do next. And we've been thinking about this a lot. Some of my team members are here. So we've been thinking about this a lot as a center of how do we kind of help with that transition. And so the more that we know about the potentials outside of the university, the better we can serve our students. That's a great one. Anything else? And we can always have time for questions at the end. So let's think about what are some of the things to think about when you're exploring what you might want to get involved in. I actually think this is a great question for life, but in the context of this, what's your why? Why do you want to do this? Is it because you want to develop certain skills? Is it that you just want to, feel like you're connected to something that is passionate for you and it gives you a sense of purpose and meaning? Do you want to build new relationships? Is it something that you care deeply about? I mean, really put some thought into that, because that will really help you think about what are the possibilities, and also being honest about what your intentions are, so that you can communicate that to the community partners that you will be approaching or engaging with. Another thing to think about is, what do you have to offer? And that really covers a range too, right? It could be professional skills. It could be you have certain relationships and networks that maybe this organization would find useful. It could be you have some substantive knowledge in the work that they do. It could be that you're just energetic and passionate and willing to be the person that's going to pick stuff up or drive stuff around. I mean, sometimes that's what organizations need. And that can be just as helpful in building their capacity as other things. And I love this quote because it's really true. Somewhere, someone is looking for exactly what you have to offer. So just get really clear about what it is you'd like to offer in terms of public service, and that's very helpful. So this says something about my movie preferences. So when I'm talking about choose wisely, it's really about being clear about the type of organization that you want to work with. One of the things I saw when I was working with different nonprofits is that, if you're working with a small nonprofit, it's going to be scrappy oftentimes. So they're putting things together. It's not always going to be perfect. And I've seen so many times volunteers would come in and say, well, in my organization, we do this, and then try to impose a different structure on it. Maybe that's just not the best opportunity for you. If that's, if you're not willing to kind of be a little flexible and bend and flex as that organization needs it, that's fine. But maybe you might want to not go to an organization that doesn't have the ability to have this structure that you need. On the other side, large organizations oftentimes have very well-developed volunteer programs. And they may or may not have flexibility. And they may have a very clear thing they want volunteers to do. And so, for example, in a small organization, you might have an opportunity to do things that are a little bit more substantive. Versus with a large organization, they may have very clear roles. And it's going to take time to build into something else. So just be mindful of that. And that way it's also helpful for the organizations as well. And again, I've seen this so many times, it always makes me cringe a little bit when people are like, well, in business, we do, and not to belittle or criticize, these are really tough jobs at a lot of these nonprofits. And so try to just approach it with that spirit of, again, being in solidarity and partnership. This is huge. Know what you can do, and if you make a commitment, stick by it. I've seen this a lot where people make commitments, and because it's for them, it's volunteering, right? But for the organization, they're really depending on people to do certain things at certain times and to show up. And it can be kind of really challenging. And so again, it doesn't have, just be clear what the commitment is. If you're like, I got 4 hours on a Saturday, then find out what that means for you to do 4 hours on a Saturday in an organization that can use that well. If you've got a day, if you've got a week, if you're actually thinking about, I want to make an investment in an organization I care about, that's a different question, and that actually opens up a whole different way of thinking about working with that organization. I'll give you an example of a friend of mine. When I was on the Ella Baker Center board, I invited her to one thing, and she just got captured by it. And so slowly she's doing more, she's doing more, she's doing more. Now she's on this special advisory board where she actually is leading major pieces of their fundraising role because she just loves their work. And she's learning all of these great skills about fundraising. And so you never know where a small commitment will take you, but just be clear of what you can commit to. Oh, and I would also say that counts for things like not just your time, but also deliverables, right? Like if you commit to deliver something, do that. Great. Again, one of my 80s movies references, don't go ghost. Please don't do that. And ghosting an organization looks a lot of different ways, right? So sometimes what you'll see is people will show up and they're talking to everybody else but not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Or they're like, oh, I'm going to come in, and I know I said it was going to be 8 hours, but I've got 2 hours now. I'm going to go run around with my kids, and then I need to go grocery shopping, and I'll be back at 6, and I've got an hour then. And right, so unless that's an agreed upon arrangement, that's like kind of, they're relying on you. And it just puts them in a really big pinch. The other thing I've seen is people just ghosting entirely. Like, they just don't, you never see them again. And particularly if there's something that the organization is really relying on that person to do, it can be really detrimental. So exit gracefully is what I would say. And everybody understands life happens. So if you can't meet a commitment, people get it, but just let them know. Don't just go away. Great. So any other ideas on we might want to lift up about working with organizations? Just want to create space for anything else, or any quick questions that people want to ask? Great. So I have a little exercise. Have you guys seen, it's kind of making its way around the internet. I think it's called Ikagi. It's like, how do you find your purpose in life or something like that? And it's in a graph. But I kind of did a play on this to help us think through it. I may not have enough, but hopefully if you can't read these, excuse me, then you can just get the questions. And this is about helping you think through what might be, I'll let her get view those, a good volunteer opportunity for you. If you can pass those back. So the idea is these are 4 intersecting circles or questions that we want you to ask yourselves. And then ideally, what you can find where all the circles intersect would be a good opportunity for you. So the top is, what's my why? Why do I want to volunteer? What am I hoping to get out of that experience? And what am I hoping to give? The bottom is, what do I care about? What's an issue area that I want to be engaged with? What do I have to offer? Which is one of the questions we had earlier. And then what can I commit to? So what I wanted us to do is take just a few minutes. I don't want you to fill out the entire thing, but spend a little time thinking about what's my why and what do I care about. And the reason I asked you guys to talk about a book or a movie that changed your life or had an impact is that might hold a clue for one of these 2. So if that's helpful to you, you can reflect back on that conversation. But take just a few minutes, and then we'll come back together. So let me move on to this. So just to recap, there's lots of good whys. You have something to offer. I'm sure everybody in this room has things they care about. And that really commitment is about what you can just say you can do. And it can be small, it can be larger, it can grow over time. So I want to spend just a little bit of time on potential resources for where you can find opportunities. Oh, by the way, someone mentioned, because a lot of you came in late, and if you looked at the app, none of this is on the app. I was joking about the fact that I never do anything 6 weeks in advance, so I just sent in something and then did something completely different for my presentation. But they're going to put it online afterwards. So feel free to take pictures if you want, but it probably, maybe in a few days, it'll be on the app. So let me go through some of these. And yeah, I'll just go through quickly because then we'll have time to have some more questions. Volunteer Match is an organization. If you do Google search, you'll find all these guys. Where if you're interested for any kind of volunteer opportunity, and they have a really sophisticated way of categorizing that, you can go and put that in and they'll give you some opportunities that'll come up, either categories, issue areas, where it's located geographically if you want something close to you. Idealist is both a job board, but also they post a lot of volunteer opportunities. BoardSource I like because being on a board has responsibilities that are different than other types of volunteering. There's fiduciary responsibilities and administrative responsibilities. So BoardSource is an organization that will give you some idea of if you're a board member, these are the things that you need to know. And so it'll help prep you if you're interested in going that route. And then BridgeSpan also has job postings, but they actually post organizations that are looking for board members. And so sometimes it's hard to know where you can find board opportunities, and so that's one resource. Experience Corps and Encore careers are for those people who are thinking about volunteering as a retirement transition plan. And they're both great. And I will say, if you'll notice, if you go to a lot of organizations, a lot of them have people who are retired. Because when you think about it, it's really when you get a lot more time. It's kind of like when you're a student and when you retire, and it's a little bit harder to fit it in sometimes in the other parts of life. So they'll have some resources for that. Taproot is really interesting. So what Taproot does is they offer skilled volunteers on a pro bono basis to specific organizations. So I'll give you an example. This is also one of the grantees I had when I was working at the foundation. What they would do is they would approach a foundation and say, okay, you have these community organizations that need capacity building. And if you give us a little bit of money to help support that organization, we can find skilled professionals who will provide that service pro bono. And so they serve as kind of the matching organization for that. So if you're interested in doing something where you can take your professional skills and put it to work for an organization, they ask, I think it's a minimum of 3 months and up to a year. I think that's the time frame. And I also added a couple of international opportunities. The UN, you can volunteer with the UN if you want to. If you go check that out, it tells you a little bit about it. And International Volunteers HQ also does a number of different trips. This is one where you actually pay to go. But part of the reason I put them on there is I think they're one of the better ones for doing international volunteering. Are really thoughtful about how they do that work. And again, this is typically, I think you can go anywhere from like a week to 4 weeks. And lots of different things you can do. Environmental justice work, a lot of work with children internationally. Great. Any questions? Comments? Suggestions? Where are we at on time? We're a little bit early. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know if this was brought up, but like at Berkeley, like there could be, I mean, maybe something we can all start together, but some kind of network on campus to volunteer
Yes.
together or across disciplines. It's like, it's really nice to be at this conference with all these different people meeting. It's like, oh, you know, be able to actually talk to other, you know, across things. It's like, why couldn't we arrange something like this and we like doing community service together or something? So I don't know if there's I don't know if there already is something like that.
There is a lot of interest, a lot. In fact, someone just came up to me today and said this was one of they're putting that in one of their professional goals, is to think about how we can encourage more staff volunteering and service.
Yeah. And I was going to try and do it at my college because I'm in a leadership position in my college, so I was thinking of trying to do that kind of thing like days at my for us all to volunteer. Something not interesting. So I mean, maybe just doing it within your unit or whatever. But I just wanted to.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you raised that.
Happen to know if managers have the prerogative to say, okay, let's do a volunteer day and like let everybody else work and do that?
You know, I think it varies by unit. I know units that have done that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
There's also like a 4-hour, I think, you know, like there's a certain number of hours of community service that you're allowed to under PPSN.
Oh, really? Okay. Oh, great.
PPSN is a personnel policy manual for staff. It's unrepresented if you're not a union.
So a certain number of work hours per year you can use.
Huh.
Yeah, it's per month, so it's in the contract. It's like,
Wow. Oh, that's good to know.
It could also be used as your team building activity.
Mm-hmm.
We have done it like that, and we have also did it like at Christmas time. The whole, department sign up on this is our day.
Oh, that's great. You have a question?
She might want to join Berkeley Staff Association. They have volunteer activities that they do throughout the year, especially at the holiday time. And like I belong also to the Black Staff Association, so you might want to do an ethnic association. They do a lot of volunteer work with the communities too.
So that was Berkeley Staff Association, BSFO, and was there another one? Oh, I see.
Lots, there's
Great. Anything else? Well, this is my contact info, so feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. One last thought. How can you not end with the Dalai Lama? But really, I think I feel this very acutely. I'm a political scientist by training, so I literally live in fear every day I turn on the news. But I do think we sometimes forget that compassion is a form of radicalism, particularly at a time like this. And it doesn't mean that you don't fight the good fight, and it doesn't mean that you aren't willing to go to the mat, but always a reminder that at the end of the day, we have a shared fate and we have a shared destiny as a human community. And so I just wanted to leave with that thought. There are books in the back. I may not have brought enough books, so we have so many books at our office. So please, we're at 218 Eshelman Hall. We're typically open 9 to 5. During the summer, Mondays and Fridays, it's a little hard to get in the building. So try to come because it's kind of closing it down for cost savings. So if you can come like between Tuesday and Thursday, between 9 to 5, we're there. And please come and get a book if you don't have one today. And thank you so much for coming. Oh, did you have a question? Oh, 218 Eshelman Hall. It's right by the Student Union. Great. Thanks, everybody, so much.